Welcome to episode 127 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest insight scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend. Joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. Let's get started with my first topic. And so news broke this week that Ericsson is exiting its IoT business. And so the immediate question I had, is it a smart move? So the details are it's selling its entire IoT business that includes its IoT accelerator connectivity management platform and connected vehicle cloud platform. And they're selling it to a California-based company called Arius, A-E-R-I-S. And, Ericsson admits that this has been a money loser for them to the tune of roughly, 24 million a quarter for the last couple of quarters here. And it really, for me, it's probably a smart move for Ericsson because they are focused obviously on, other things that are really going to drive the business. And honestly, IoT is a difficult category to monetize. And I think there's got to be more there. And I think, you've got to take sort of a multi-access approach as well, similar to what T-Mobile has done. Be sort of agnostic about that. So, you got LoRaWAN for narrowband. You certainly have LTE and 5G for more, kind of massive IoT applications. But I think this clearly indicates, and we've seen Sigfox, with IoT and their demise. IoT is a challenging market, to monetize in general. But I don't know if you caught the news, but would love to get your insights too.
I actually did not catch the news, but I actually disagree with you.
Okay.
And I actually disagree with you because, if anything, this should be something that Ericsson downsizes but doesn't sell off.
Okay.
This is something that they should keep and have in their in their quiver or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I just think that they're going to want to come back to IoT in the near future. Maybe in the more distant future, but I think they're going to want to come back to it. I think they're going to regret this decision.
Yeah.
I just think that in the short term, it looks good for their investors. And I think that is ultimately the main reason for this decision. They are financially, struggling on their share price, and they're trying to appease investors. And a good way to appease investors is to get rid of a division that's losing money, which I completely understand. But I think it would be more wise to make the division less of a money loser, and fix it, rather than completely jettison the entire division, and eventually come back to it. Which this happens a lot at companies when they're struggling. A good example of that is AMD. They sold their mobile GPU division to Qualcomm.
Yeah.
Guess what? Now they need mobile GPUs, and they're licensing their discrete GPU IP for mobile use cases, which is not as good as the mobile IP that they sold to Qualcomm, which is now powering Adreno. And that whole architecture just keeps growing in terms of performance per watt. So I think there are some times that decisions are made in the wrong conditions, and I think they'll probably regret this decision down the road.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. And certainly if they want to go back to it, you talked about Qualcomm there for a moment. You and I spent time with Qualcomm. I think it was either earlier this year or late the previous year, and learned a lot about what Qualcomm is doing with putting discrete solutions together for smart cities, which is one IoT application. But certainly there are more IoT applications beyond that, including automotive that I was speaking to as well. But point counterpoint, great insight from your perspective. But let's move to your first topic this week, and you want to talk about Verizon and where they're at hitting POPs with their C-band deployment, and also an update on their vRAN deployments.
Yeah, so Verizon had a busy week. It really seems like their network is finally coming into itself. And I think that comes with first announcing that they have hit their goal of 175 million POPs for their 5G C-band network, which is really going to be the backbone of any 5G network. I think I saw Ericsson's report that said that, mid-band is really where the majority of the 5G experience is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's why Verizon's mid-band C-band network needed to get rolled out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And 175 million pops isn't quite 200 million. I think you and I both agree 200 million is kind of the number you need to
Yeah.
have enough of a network that your customers are satisfied with the experience,
Mhm.
and developers can actually depend on that network being available to make the experience of building an application and then their users enjoying the application good. So I think 175 is close, but I
Yeah.
think they'll hit 200 million next year. They did this ahead of time. They said by the end of the year, so they did it a
Yeah.
month early, and I think they're gonna continue to move down this path, and I think they're gonna start clawing back some market share from AT&T and T-Mobile as they start to light up more of their network
Yeah.
and taking advantage of more of their local zones with Amazon and all of the edge compute capabilities that brings.
Yeah, and I know you're going to talk about a milestone with respect to vRAN site deployments as well. And really, Samsung has been a partner with Verizon from the very beginning of its 5G
Yep.
deployment. And what I like about vRAN, in fact, I'm actually going to be doing a recording later this afternoon that I think is going to be broadcast next week with Samsung Networks, where we're going to talk about vRAN and some of the benefits. But certainly the agility, the speed of which that you can deploy virtualized RAN, and the agility for the operators, and not to mention, the CapEx savings and the OpEx savings that are there too. But I don't want to steal your thunder, so I'll let
Yeah.
you
So
let you
the
go.
other thing was that they announced that they've got 10,000 vRAN sites with Samsung,
Yeah,
which is a big deal because that's a lot of sites.
yeah,
Um, and I think their goal is to hit 20,000. And that includes lighting up lighting up Ericsson's sites as well,
yeah.
which is using Ericsson's 5G Cloud RAN. And
Hmm.
that's how they will achieve 20,000 between Ericsson and Samsung. So
Yeah.
it really sounds like they're modernizing their network. They're expanding its capabilities, and I think um, it sounds like they're really on the right path.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's definitely the right approach to get those C-band spectrum assets built out, sooner versus later. You and I have spoken on multiple podcasts that was going to be the biggest challenge for Verizon with their mid-band deployment. But let's go to my second topic this week. I want to talk about T-Mobile, and they published a state of fixed wireless report. And it's quite interesting. I mean, T-Mobile has been a leader in FWA in the US, and so they officially announced that they've surpassed 2 million subscribers. That's well up from its 1 million number that it reported earlier in the year. And what they're really speaking to is they're seeing a lot of growth from taking share from the traditional broadband cable providers. So, and their claims are they're growing this at 70% quarter over quarter, and they point to what's fueling fixed wireless access growth is just decades of customer dissatisfaction with the traditional ISP models. I
Yep.
mean, I recently had an experience with Xfinity with my home in Florida, and just trying to get a bill straightened out because I let a credit card expire. It was like splitting the atom. Nine DMs and then 3 emails and a phone call later, I got it. What was fairly a simple, issue resolved. And so I think they're aggressively going at it. There's no doubt that T-Mobile is the leader in the U.S. What I find interesting is they did not break out on the 2 million subs, um, business internet versus consumer. And so I'm assuming that the majority of the subscribership is consumer as T-Mobile for Business continues to build its portfolio out. What's interesting is that when you look at AT&T, they primarily sell their FWA service to businesses. And so it's sort of a tale of two cities here. But I think, I've spent time with AT&T and CEO John Stankey. They're a fiber first strategy that supports the backhaul for their 5G mobile build out. But at the same time, John has stated that, hey, where it makes sense economically, we're going to deploy FWA as well. But I don't know. I don't think you were able to join the call because you were traveling the review with T-Mobile. But any additional insights you want to share with our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, I actually did look into this afterwards because I was traveling.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is they really talked about subscriber growth from like Q4 of 21 to Q3 of 2022.
Yeah.
And they said that, like there were 3.3 million net ads for broadband. And out of those 3.3 million, 1.7 million were T-Mobile and 870,000 were Verizon. And then only 713,000 were non-fixed wireless net ads.
Okay.
So they, between T-Mobile and Verizon, they're kind of sucking the air out of the room for the traditional broadband, companies.
Yeah.
And they represent over 77% of the market for net ads, which is a big deal. And I think, I don't really know how the Comcasts and the Spectrums of the world will be able to compete with that long term.
Right.
And I think that's why you see them pushing harder on their mobile products because they're just deciding that if they're not going to win in fixed broadband, they're going to go and come after mobile and wireless, and they are seeing some growth there. So I think the lines between telecom companies are starting to blur, and what's considered a mobile carrier and what's considered a broadband provider is becoming a blurry line.
Yeah.
It was interesting to see that T-Mobile also published some usage trends for their consumers,
Yeah.
which we know are mostly consumer. They said they were only 23% or 23% used less than 100 gigs per month, and only 11% used more than 1 terabyte. So the vast majority of their customers are between 100 gigs and a terabyte.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how, their median monthly usage was greater than an industry average. But their average monthly data usage was less. So it's, they're around 500 gigs. And it's just really interesting to see how fixed wireless is going to play out. I think we're seeing lots of rapid growth right now. And I think it will eventually peter out a little bit. But I also think that once they simplify the experience even more and enable people to understand that they have options, and as coverage improves, I think we'll start to see more fixed wireless as an option. And I think that fixed wireless will become its own, slice of the network. And it will become something that operators will utilize in a way to maximize their network capacity and resources.
Yeah, no, I agree. I kind of view FWA, as these MNOs get to build out their mid-band spectrum and the performance improves. I really look at 5G FWA as sort of the cable broadband killer. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to have a set of customers that are going to appreciate the speed of symmetrical fiber, multi-gig fiber. And then you're going to have, a certain segment of the population that are going to be satisfied with the performance of an FWA, type solution that don't necessarily need the speed, the throughput, the performance, the latency that fiber delivers. So I really sort of view FWA as sort of the cable broadband killer. But certainly the trends are very positive and adoption is very high, and T-Mobile's really sort of driving that. So, but let's move to your second topic this week, and you want to talk about a couple of deals that both AT&T and T-Mobile are working on.
Yeah, so AT&T announced two partnerships, one with BMW for NumberSync for connected car, and then another with Polaris that is more for like tracking and updating off-road vehicles. So I think the Polaris one was a little bit less interesting, but it is for utilizing coverage. So that's something interesting there. But the NumberSync is interesting because what it does is it takes the BMW's personal eSIM capability and syncs it with your actual smartphone number that you have on AT&T. And that allows you to basically sync up your car with your phone, so that way you have the ability to take calls from your car, which allows you to have better coverage and more integration and take advantage of texting and some other smart messaging features. So we'll see how that works in practice and what that looks like. But it's an interesting feature. And then also, in addition to that, T-Mobile announced a partnership with Vinfast, which is a Vietnamese EV maker, which is launching in the US and Europe. And they're going to be using T-Mobile as their connectivity provider in North America and Europe for both 5G and IoT applications. And
Mm-hmm.
it will enable them to, push IoT updates, monitor vehicle locations and performance, and notify users if they have issues, and do all of that, over the network. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear more and more automotive partnerships being inked.
Yeah.
I think this was traditionally AT&T's strong suit. As
Mm-hmm.
somebody who adopted LTE in an automotive application, AT&T was kind of the only choice back then.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it seems with 5G, T-Mobile has become a much more rounded competitor to AT&T in this space.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, these are great sort of, extensible monetization opportunities for the operators. I mean, to your point, AT&T has enjoyed, a footprint in this space, but it's great to see T-Mobile notching some wins as well. And I'm sure, Verizon will be right there as well. And, I've had LTE connectivity in one of my vehicles, never really, utilized it. But certainly, 5G opens up some very, very interesting use cases. I mean, you spoke to some of them right now, but also, kind of infotainment, oriented as well. So cool stuff. But let's move to my third and final topic this week. And I want to talk about Cradlepoint. And I think on prior podcasts, I mentioned that I did a LinkedIn Live with the Cradlepoint team, and we sort of talked about their Net Cloud Exchange. And this is their LTE and 5G wireless wide area network platform. They've been sort of rolling in updates and features to it over the course of this year. And then just this week, they added zero trust network access support to really bolster the security. And from my perspective, ZTNA was initially targeted towards remote access users only. But I think what the industry is discovering is that, the universal applicability is stronger because basically a zero trust principle authenticates a user to an application and not flatly to a network. And so you can use dynamic policy and that sort of thing just to scrutinize, what occurs on the network and to prevent unauthorized network devices, on a flat network. So nothing totally earth-shattering here. It's sort of a kind of an evolution of what they've been rolling out. But now with ZTNA, I feel like Cradlepoint has a great private wireless solution that meets all of the needs for the enterprise from a flexibility standpoint and a security standpoint. So I know this is infrastructure and it's not sexy end device or AR and VR, but you want to add anything before we move to your final topic?
Yeah, I actually think this is a big deal, just because I think we have to take all types of connectivity more seriously when it comes to security.
Yeah.
Because eventually what ends up happening is some of these things get adopted into small businesses or medium-sized businesses, and those become attack vectors
Yeah.
for larger businesses. So I think it's important that we take security seriously at all levels. And I was also going to say I appreciate you explaining what ZTNA was, because
Mhm.
I was going to ask you to explain it, but you
Okay.
also already anticipated my question, because
Yeah.
I know what zero trust is, but I don't know what ZTNA is.
Yeah. 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 We've begun to read each other's minds after we've been doing this for 2.5 years, my friend. So yeah, and it's becoming table stakes now. I mean, and lots of people claim it, but it's not the easiest thing to accomplish. And certainly Cradlepoint, as a part of Ericsson, they're making the right moves. I mean, there's some other players out there that are doing things like Inseego in this regard, and it's all great because choice breeds innovation and better cost leverage for enterprise customers. But let's move to your third and final topic, and you want to talk about Apple.
Yeah, so this is not, I wouldn't say necessarily the biggest announcement.
Okay.
In fact, some people might have missed it entirely.
Mm-hmm.
But iOS 16.2, which released fairly recently. I think it was last week, or maybe even earlier this week. They released the 16.2 RC to developers and beta users ahead of the official release. So 16.2 was actually trending on Twitter at one point, which is interesting because usually OS updates don't, incremental updates don't really trend on Twitter.
Right.
But the reason why is because it's bringing 5G to the iPhone in India. And the reason for that is because the operators in India are now deploying their 5G networks, and iPhone users weren't able to take advantage of their phone's 5G capabilities because there were no 5G networks for them to use.
Yeah.
So this 16.2 update, which will be rolling out fairly soon to the broader audiences in India, will support the iPhone 12, iPhone 13, iPhone 14, and iPhone SE 3. So that's 4 different models of the iPhone that will suddenly have 5G access that previously did not. And because India is the second largest mobile, market in the world, this is actually a big deal. This will, considerably increase the amount of 5G users in India, overnight, and it will start to allow application developers to start taking advantage of 5G in the world's second largest mobile market.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, obviously those iPhone models had to ship with a 5G capable modem, but I'm assuming the software update basically unlocked that capability. So to
I mean, it did, exactly, because there was no reason to have that turned on. Seeking for an NR network when there was none, and trying to light up capabilities that would increase power consumption unnecessarily. So I think this is a good thing, and it's nice that they're doing it quickly, and they're kind of anticipating the rapid rollout across all the different carriers in India.
Yeah, India has been a little behind, especially with their spectrum auctions and that sort of thing. So it's good to see that that country is beginning, to get things lit up. So, but hey, it's another great podcast this week, my friend. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights for a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.